We're going to be joined by Marisa Limón Garza. She's the Deputy Director at Hope Border Institute. That's an independent grassroots community organization, and we reached her in El Paso, Texas. Marisa, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Marisa, the shooting there is being treated as domestic terrorism. So what kind of reaction have you been getting from the community?
The community is still stunned by these actions. Unfortunately, we're not completely shocked with the level of rhetoric that comes out of Washington, D.C. and out of this president's mouth. It's not completely surprising that actions would follow by people that may have the same beliefs that he does. And so now we find ourselves in a place where a community that's vibrant and beautiful, binational, bicultural, is being trounced upon once again. And unfortunately, this attack had tragic consequences.
Marisa, in the hours after the attack, it was reported that some of the victims in the shooting were reluctant to go to reunification centers where they might be reunited with their family, or if they were injured, they were reluctant to go to the hospital because they're afraid of being deported. Now, I know you can't go into specifics, but how does your institute help in this case?
So our institute has really promoted our resources. Our phone lines, as well as our email and social media channels, are all open. We understand that here in a thriving community like this that is full of immigrants, many generations of immigrants, as well as recent arrivals, that mixed status households where some, maybe the children are U.S. citizens and the parents are not, that these are daily realities. So if you see an area guarded off by police cars and flashing lights and authority figures, oftentimes an immigrant community or a family that doesn't have documentation here would not enter into those spaces. And so now we had to really share with people that we would stand with them in solidarity, help them understand their rights, and navigate that process, especially if they had a loved one either killed in the attack or involved and injured. So it was incredibly important for us that they understand that they have resources and support, because even though these spaces like hospitals, schools, churches have been considered sacred spaces that are not being used by ICE attacks, we know that that has happened. And so in just a few weeks ago, when we had the threat of ICE raids across the country, it's not surprising that people would be on edge, already weathering the psychological trauma of this tragedy, but then also having to navigate how they deal with their immigration status on top of it.
So what kind of advice do you give them?
Our advice is really to know your rights. There's a variety of things that people can do and have access to as they're navigating these spaces. And what we've seen across the country that has really worked is an accompaniment model where people, U.S. citizens namely, stand with those that are undocumented and help them go through this process. And in many times, ICE officials tend to back off. And we're really appealing to the joint humanity, the compassion of our community. We have many neighbors and family members that work in these agencies. In many ways, it's the path to the middle class in the borderlands, which is even more horrific, but it's part of the fabric of who we are. So we appeal to the good graces, we appeal to their compassion, and we stand with them. It's important that we have our own manifesto here, and it's a manifesto of love, of justice, of compassion, and standing in solidarity with our neighbors.
Trump spoke today denouncing racism, blaming the internet and mental illness for those shootings. What are your thoughts on what he had to say?
It's incredibly challenging to hear that from the president and really take it as no more than lip service. Seems like just an opportunity to share what's expected of him and not necessarily something sincere, since we have so much documented proof of his feelings about immigrants, about his ways that he's called out Mexicans in particular. Here we are in a border community of the U.S. and Mexico. So while I'm sure it's checking a box, I don't really feel like it's anything more sincere than that.
Marisa, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Marisa Limón Garza is the Deputy Director at the Hope Border Institute. We reached her in El Paso, Texas.